Ma'am, I'm going to need to ask you to leave. You've been walking around for 20 minutes without making a purchase, and frankly, I don't think you can afford anything in here. Those words were spoken to a black woman browsing luxury cars at an upscale dealership. The manager who said them had no idea he was talking to the owner of the entire business. Here's what makes this story even more incredible. Only 8% of all car dealerships in America are owned by women. And when we talk about black women, that number drops to almost zero. This woman was one of the rarest success stories in the automotive industry, and her own employee just told her to get out. What happened next changed everything. You're about to hear the true story of a CEO who went undercover at her own luxury car dealership after receiving disturbing complaints from customers. She thought she was just checking on her business. She had no idea she was about to experience the exact discrimination that had been driving away her customers. The manager who insulted her had no clue he was about to make the biggest mistake of his career. The security guards he called had no idea they were being asked to remove the person who signed their paychecks. The other employees had no idea they were about to witness a moment that would change their workplace forever. This story has everything: power, prejudice, justice, and a lesson that every business owner needs to hear. It's about what happens when bias meets reality, when assumptions crash into truth, and when someone with real power decides enough is enough. If you've ever felt invisible in your own space, if you've ever been judged before you even opened your mouth, if you've ever been told you don't belong somewhere you absolutely do belong, then hit that like button right now. Because this story will blow your mind. You won't believe how this ends, but you definitely won't forget the lessons it teaches. Let's get into it. Meet Keisha Reynolds. At 38 years old, she's the CEO and owner of Reynolds Luxury Motors, one of the most successful black-owned dealership chains in the country. But her story didn't start in a boardroom or with a trust fund. 15 years ago, Keisha was a 23-year-old single mother working the sales floor at a small car lot, making $8 an hour plus commission. She had dropped out of college to support her young daughter and was determined to prove that hard work could overcome any obstacle. Back then, customers would walk right past her to talk to male salespeople. Managers would give her the difficult customers nobody else wanted to deal with. She was told she was too aggressive when she closed deals and not aggressive enough when she didn't hit her numbers. But Keisha had something her competitors didn't. She genuinely cared about finding people the right car at the right price. While other salespeople were pushing expensive add-ons and unnecessary features, she was building trust. Her customers started asking for her specifically. They brought their friends and family members. Within 2 years, she became the top salesperson at that dealership. Within 5 years, she was the sales manager. By year 8, she had saved enough money to buy her first small lot. That single location grew into 3, then 5, then 10. Today, Reynolds Luxury Motors operates 12 locations across 3 states, specializing in high-end vehicles and exceptional customer service. The company brings in over $50 million in annual revenue. Keisha has been featured in automotive industry magazines and speaks at business conferences about entrepreneurship and leadership. But success at her level comes with unique challenges. As one of the few black women in automotive leadership, every decision she makes is scrutinized. Every mistake gets magnified. Every success gets questioned. Recently, those challenges became impossible to ignore. Customer complaints started coming in through multiple channels. Online reviews, direct emails, phone calls to corporate. The pattern was disturbing. Black and Hispanic customers were reporting poor treatment, long wait times, and dismissive attitudes from staff at her flagship location in downtown. Even more concerning, the dealership's minority customer retention rates had dropped by 30% over 6 months. Something was happening at her most important location, and traditional management reports weren't telling the whole story. Keisha faced a difficult choice: conduct a formal investigation that might create tension among her staff, or find another way to discover the truth about what was really happening on her sales floor. She chose option 3, go undercover as a regular customer. Drop a comment if you think she should have revealed her identity from the start. The first complaint came through email on a Tuesday morning. A black customer named Marcus Williams wrote that he'd been ignored for 45 minutes while watching white customers get immediate attention. He left without buying the BMW he'd come to purchase. 2 days later, another email. A Hispanic woman described being asked for extra forms of identification and proof of income before being allowed to test drive a vehicle, requirements that weren't mentioned to the white couple who drove off the lot right before her. By the end of that week, Keisha had received 7 similar complaints, all from minority customers, all describing the same pattern of dismissive treatment, unnecessary delays, and thinly veiled discrimination. The numbers backed up the stories. Her data analyst presented charts that made Keisha's stomach turn. Minority customer retention had dropped 30% in 6 months. Sales to Black and Hispanic customers were down 25%. Walk-in traffic from diverse neighborhoods had nearly stopped completely. Her flagship location, the showroom she was most proud of, had become a place where people who looked like her weren't welcome. When Keisha brought these concerns to her board of directors, their response was predictable. "Don't overreact," they said. "Handle this quietly. We don't want to create problems where none exist. Maybe send out a memo about customer service standards." A memo for discrimination. Keisha knew that approach wouldn't work. Formal investigations make people defensive. Anonymous surveys get generic responses. Management walkthroughs give everyone time to put on their best behavior. She needed to see what her customers were experiencing, not what her employees claimed was happening. The plan was simple: dress like a regular customer, visit the dealership, and shop for a luxury vehicle. No expensive jewelry, no designer clothes, no hints about her position. Just a Black woman looking to buy a car. That Saturday morning, Keisha stood in front of her bedroom mirror, making the transformation. Off came the Rolex watch, the pearl necklace, the Armani blazer. She put on jeans, a simple blouse, and comfortable flats. She traded her luxury purse for a basic handbag and left her business cards at home. Looking at herself, she realized this was probably the first time in 10 years she'd dressed down. As a successful businesswoman, she'd gotten used to power dressing, to clothes that announced her status and demanded respect. Now she was about to find out what happened when those signals were gone. Derek Thornfield straightened his tie and walked across the showroom floor with the confidence of a man who'd been managing car sales for 12 years. At 42, he prided himself on reading customers within the first 30 seconds. He could spot time wasters, serious buyers, and everything in between. And this Black woman browsing their premium vehicles? She was definitely wasting everyone's time. Derek approached Keisha with a forced smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Good afternoon, ma'am. I'm Derek Thornfield, the sales manager here. I understand you've been looking around for a while now." Keisha turned to face him. "Yes, I'm interested in purchasing a luxury sedan. Your salesperson Tony was helping me, but he stepped away." "Right. Well, I wanted to have a quick chat with you." Derek's tone was professional but cold. "I notice you've been browsing for about 25 minutes now, looking at multiple vehicles, sitting in several cars. Can I ask what specifically you're shopping for today?" The question seemed innocent enough, but Keisha recognized the subtext. She'd just watched Derek have completely different conversations with white customers. Conversations that started with enthusiasm and offers of assistance, not interrogations about intent. "I'm looking for a BMW or Mercedes sedan with luxury features," Keisha replied. "I'd like to test drive a few models to compare them." Derek's expression shifted slightly. "I see. And are you pre-approved for financing?" These particular vehicles start at around $70,000, and our premium models can reach well over $100,000. There it was. The assumption that she couldn't afford the car she was looking at. Keisha maintained her composure. I'd prefer to test drive first, then discuss financing options. Well, here's the thing, Derek said, his voice dropping to what he probably thought was a reasonable tone. We have a policy about test drives on our high-end vehicles. We need to verify employment, run a credit check, and see proof of income before we can let customers take these cars off the lot. Keisha looked around the showroom. That's interesting. I didn't notice other customers filling out paperwork before their test drives. Derek followed her gaze to where Jennifer was handing keys to the middle-aged white man, who was walking toward a $60,000 Lexus without having filled out a single form. Well, those are different situations, Derek said, his discomfort becoming obvious. Look, ma'am, I'm going to be straight with you. You've been walking around here for nearly half an hour. You've sat in multiple vehicles, and you seem to be browsing without any real buying intent. This is a business, not a showroom for people to just look around. The accusation hung in the air like a challenge. Other customers nearby started glancing over, sensing tension. Keisha felt her jaw tighten, but kept her voice level. I told you I'm interested in purchasing a vehicle. I've asked to test drive cars in your inventory. How exactly does that suggest I'm not a serious buyer? Because serious buyers come in with financing already arranged, they know exactly what they want, and they don't spend 30 minutes just wandering around touching everything. Derek shot back, his professional mask slipping. They certainly don't ask to test drive vehicles that are clearly outside their price range. And how do you know what my price range is? Keisha asked. Derek's eyes swept over her casual clothes, her simple handbag, her lack of expensive jewelry. His silence was answer enough. You know what? Derek said, pulling out his phone. I think we're done here. I'm going to have to ask you to leave. You're disrupting other customers' shopping experience, and frankly, I don't believe you have any intention of making a purchase today. Keisha couldn't believe what she was hearing. You're asking me to leave because I want to test drive a car? I'm asking you to leave because you're wasting everyone's time, Derek replied, already dialing a number on his phone. Security? Yes, this is Derek at Reynolds Luxury Motors. We have a situation in the showroom. I need someone here right away to escort a customer out. The showroom had gone quiet. Other customers and salespeople were staring at the confrontation unfolding in the middle of the floor. Some looked uncomfortable, others seemed curious about the drama. Derek ended the call and looked back at Keisha with satisfaction. Security will be here in 5 minutes. I suggest you leave voluntarily before this becomes more embarrassing for you. Keisha stood perfectly still, processing what had just happened. Her own employee had just called security to remove her from her own business. The manager she'd trusted to run her flagship location had just demonstrated exactly the kind of discrimination her customers had been complaining about. But Derek Thornfield had no idea who he was talking to. Pause the video and guess what you think happens next. Then keep watching to see if you're right. 5 minutes later, 2 security guards entered the showroom. They were both large men in uniform, walking with the kind of authority that immediately drew everyone's attention. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Customers turned to stare. The busy Saturday afternoon atmosphere turned tense and uncomfortable. Derek pointed across the floor. That's her, over by the BMW. She's been causing problems and refuses to leave when asked. The guards approached Keisha, who was still standing calmly next to the vehicle she'd been examining. One of them, a heavy-set man with graying hair, spoke first. Ma'am, we're going to need you to come with us. The manager has asked you to leave the premises. Keisha looked at both guards, then at Derek, who was watching from a distance with his arms crossed and a satisfied expression. The entire showroom had become an audience to her humiliation. Customers were whispering to each other, some recording with their phones, others looking embarrassed to witness what was happening. "Officers," Keisha said, her voice steady and clear enough for others to hear. "I think there's been a misunderstanding." "No misunderstanding," Derek called out from across the room. "You were asked to leave and you refused. Now you need to go." The second security guard, younger and clearly uncomfortable with the situation, stepped forward. "Look, we don't want any trouble. If you just come with us quietly, we can avoid making this a bigger scene than it already is." Keisha nodded slowly. "You're absolutely right. Nobody wants a scene." She reached into her handbag and pulled out a black leather wallet. "Before we go any further, though, I think you should see this." She handed the first security guard a business card. He glanced at it, then looked at her face, then back at the card. His expression changed completely. "Ma'am, this says you're the CEO and owner of Reynolds Luxury Motors," Keisha finished. "This dealership, these cars, this building, I own all of it." The guard stared at the card, then showed it to his partner. Both men looked confused and uncertain about what to do next. Derek, still standing across the showroom, couldn't hear the conversation but could see the guards weren't escorting Keisha out. He walked over, irritation clear on his face. "What's the holdup?" "I told you, she needs to leave." The first security guard held up the business card. "Sir, I think you need to see this." Derek grabbed the card and read it. His face went white. His mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. He looked at the card, then at Keisha, then back at the card. That's not possible," he whispered. Keisha reached back into her handbag and pulled out a key fob, not car keys, but the master key system for the entire dealership. She pressed a button, and every car alarm in the showroom chirped once in acknowledgement. The sound echoed through the silent showroom like a gavel in a courtroom. "My name is Keisha Reynolds," she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "I built this company from nothing 15 years ago. I sign your paychecks. I approve your vacation requests. I set the customer service standards that you just completely ignored." Derek's face had gone from white to red. Sweat appeared on his forehead. His hands were shaking as he held the business card. The showroom was completely silent. Customers stood frozen, unsure whether to stay or leave. Salespeople stared in shock, recognizing their boss, but unable to process what they'd just witnessed. The security guards stood awkwardly, realizing they'd been called to remove the owner of the building from her own property. Tony, the young salesperson who'd first approached Keisha, covered his face with his hands. Derek opened his mouth to speak, but nothing came out. The man who'd been so confident, so authoritative, so certain about his judgment just minutes before, now looked like he wanted to disappear completely. The woman he'd just tried to humiliate and remove from the premises was his boss. Derek's first instinct was damage control. His face flushed red as he stumbled over his words, looking around the showroom at all the witnesses to his career-ending mistake. "Ms. Reynolds, I had no idea it was you. You're not dressed like, you usually wear." He stopped, realizing that every word was making things worse. "If I had known who you were, this never would have happened." Keisha looked at him with the kind of calm that comes before a storm. "That's exactly the problem, Derek. It never should have happened to anyone, regardless of who they are." The security guards quietly excused themselves, clearly wanting no part of what was about to unfold. Other customers began leaving the showroom, some taking pictures and videos as they headed for the exits. Word was already spreading on social media. Tony, the young salesperson, stepped forward hesitantly. "Ms. Reynolds, I'm so sorry. I should have provided better service. I should have." "Tony, you did exactly what you've been trained to do," Keisha interrupted, her voice firm but not unkind. "The question is, who trained you to treat customers differently based on how they look?" Around the showroom, other employees had gathered. Their reactions told a story. Some looked genuinely shocked, covering their mouths in disbelief. But others, particularly the veteran sales staff, exchanged glances that suggested this kind of incident wasn't surprising to them. Jennifer, the saleswoman who'd enthusiastically helped the white customer earlier, stepped forward. "Ms. Reynolds, in my defense, I was already helping another customer when you arrived. Were you helping someone when you immediately approached the gentleman who came in after me?" Keisha asked. "The one you gave car keys to without any paperwork?" Jennifer's face went pale. She had no answer. Derek was still trying to salvage the situation. "Look, this is all just a big misunderstanding. Maybe we can discuss this privately in my office? Work out some kind of solution." "Derek, there is no misunderstanding," Keisha replied. "What happened here today wasn't an accident or a mistake. It was a pattern of behavior that my customers have been complaining about for months." She turned to address the remaining staff members. "How many of you have seen customers treated differently based on their race or appearance? How many of you have watched minority customers get passed over, ignored, or given substandard service?" The silence was deafening. A few employees looked at their shoes. Others glanced nervously at Derek. Finally, Maria, a newer saleswoman, raised her hand slightly. "Ms. Reynolds, I've seen it happen. I've tried to help customers that other people weren't helping. But I was told I was being too aggressive, trying to steal sales from other team members." "What else have you seen, Maria?" "Customers being asked for extra documentation that we don't normally require. Customers being shown less expensive cars than what they asked for. Customers being told vehicles aren't available when they actually are." Derek shot Maria a warning look, but it was too late. The floodgates had opened. Another employee, James from the service department, spoke up. "I've heard customers complain about being ignored or treated rudely. Some said they'd never come back. A few said they were going to leave reviews warning other people about how they were treated." Keisha nodded, processing each confession. "And did anyone report these incidents to management?" More uncomfortable silence. "That's because Derek was the management they would have reported to," Maria said quietly. Derek's face went from red to white. "That's not fair. I run a professional operation here. If there were real problems, someone would have brought them to my attention." "Derek, you just called security on a potential customer for the crime of shopping while black," Keisha said. "You demonstrated exactly why nobody felt comfortable bringing these issues to you." She looked around the showroom at her employees, some ashamed, some defensive, some clearly relieved that the truth was finally coming out. "What happened here today wasn't just about me. It was about every black customer, every Hispanic customer, every person who doesn't fit your idea of what a luxury car buyer should look like. You've been turning away business and damaging our reputation because of your biases. If you're loving this story of justice, smash that subscribe button. We have more incredible stories coming." 3 days after the showroom confrontation, Keisha sat in her corporate office surrounded by security footage monitors, sales reports, and customer files. What she was about to discover would prove that her undercover experience wasn't an isolated incident. It was part of a much larger problem. She started with the security cameras. The dealership's system recorded everything, storing footage for 6 months. Keisha pulled up recordings from the past 8 weeks, focusing on customer interactions during busy periods. What she saw made her stomach turn. Video after video showed the same patterns. A black couple entering the showroom and standing unattended for 15 minutes, while white customers received immediate assistance. A Hispanic man being asked to provide 3 forms of identification before test driving a mid-level sedan, while a white woman drove off the lot in an expensive SUV after showing only her driver's license. One particularly disturbing recording showed an elderly black woman being followed around the showroom by Derek, who kept asking if she was just looking or if she had specific financing in place. The woman left after 20 minutes without speaking to a single salesperson. But the most damaging footage showed Derek instructing his staff during a Monday morning meeting 3 weeks earlier. "Look, we need to focus on qualified buyers," he said. "Don't waste time on people who are just browsing or probably can't afford our inventory. Use your judgment about who's serious." His "use your judgment" comment now looked like code for racial profiling. Next, Keisha reviewed her company's training records. What she found was shocking in its absence. While her other 11 locations had completed diversity and inclusion training within the past year, the flagship location had somehow missed every scheduled session. Derek had consistently reported that his team was too busy with sales goals to attend training workshops. He'd requested that educational materials be emailed instead of conducting live sessions. Those emails, Keisha discovered, had never been opened by most of the sales staff. The financial data told an even more troubling story. Keisha pulled sales reports broken down by customer demographics, information she'd never thought to analyze before. At her other locations, roughly 35% of sales came from minority customers, reflecting the diverse communities they served. But at the flagship location, that number had dropped to just 18% over the past 6 months. Even more striking was the repeat customer data. While her other dealerships maintained a 70% retention rate for minority customers, the flagship location's retention rate for Black and Hispanic customers had fallen to 38%. She calculated the financial impact: lost sales totaling over $2 million in just 6 months. Customer referrals from minority communities had virtually stopped. Online reviews from Black and Hispanic customers averaged 2.1 stars, compared to 4.3 stars from white customers. The reputation damage extended beyond individual sales. Keisha discovered that her dealership had been removed from several community partnership programs. The local NAACP chapter had quietly stopped recommending Reynolds luxury motors to their members. A Hispanic business association had crossed her company off their preferred vendor list. Most revealing was the customer feedback database. Complaint after complaint described the same experiences Keisha had endured. Being ignored, questioned about financing before being shown vehicles, asked for excessive documentation, and treated with suspicion rather than respect. One review particularly stood out. "I've been saving for 3 years to buy my dream car. I walked into Reynolds Luxury Motors excited to make the biggest purchase of my life. I left feeling humiliated and unwanted. They lost a $40,000 sale because they assumed I couldn't afford it based on how I looked." The data painted a clear picture. This wasn't about a few bad interactions or misunderstandings. Derek had created a culture where discrimination was tolerated, even encouraged. His "use your judgment" approach had given staff permission to treat customers differently based on appearance and assumptions about economic status. The cost wasn't just financial. It was about fundamental fairness, community trust, and the values Keisha had built her company on. As she stared at the charts showing declining minority sales, lost customers, and damaged community relationships, Keisha realized that her undercover experience had exposed something much bigger than poor customer service. It had revealed systematic discrimination that threatened everything she'd worked to build. Friday morning, 9 a.m. Keisha sat across from Derek Thornfield in the conference room where she'd hired him 2 years earlier. This time, HR Director Patricia Williams was also present, along with legal counsel. Derek had spent the week trying to minimize the damage. He'd sent multiple emails apologizing, suggesting additional training, proposing diversity initiatives. He'd even offered to take a pay cut if it meant keeping his job. But Keisha had made her decision after reviewing the evidence. "Derek, I'm terminating your employment effective immediately," she said, sliding a folder across the table. "The reasons are documented in your termination letter, but I want to make sure you understand exactly why this is happening." Derek's face crumpled. "Ms. Reynolds, please." I know I made a mistake with you, but I can fix this. I can change. This isn't about one mistake, Keisha replied. You created a culture of discrimination that cost us over $2 million in lost sales and damaged our reputation in the community. You ignored company training requirements, failed to address customer complaints, and instructed staff to profile customers based on appearance. She opened another folder. You told Maria she was being too aggressive for helping minority customers. You consistently scheduled your team out of diversity training. You implemented unofficial policies requiring extra documentation from certain customers. This wasn't ignorance, Derek. This was deliberate. The HR director handed Derek his final paperwork. Your health benefits continue for 30 days. Security will escort you out after we finish here. Derek sat in stunned silence, finally understanding that his actions had consequences beyond a simple reprimand. After Derek left the building, Keisha gathered the remaining sales staff. The team looked nervous, unsure about their own job security and what changes were coming. I want to be clear about something, Keisha began. Everyone in this room still has a job, but things are going to change immediately. She pulled up a presentation on the conference room screen. Effective Monday, every employee at every Reynolds location will complete 40 hours of diversity and customer service training. This isn't optional. This isn't something you can skip because you're busy with sales goals. The slides showed new policies. Standardized customer interaction procedures, documented test drive requirements that applied equally to all customers, and clear consequences for discriminatory behavior. We're also implementing a mystery shopper program, Keisha continued. Professional shoppers from diverse backgrounds will visit our dealerships monthly, posing as regular customers. They'll document their experiences and report directly to me. Tony raised his hand tentatively. Ms. Reynolds, what if we make mistakes? What if we don't handle something perfectly? Tony, I'm not expecting perfection, Keisha replied. I'm expecting respect. I'm expecting every customer to be treated as a potential buyer regardless of age, race, gender, or how they're dressed. If you can provide that, you'll do fine. She clicked to the next slide, showing customer satisfaction goals. Our target is simple. Customer service ratings should be consistent across all demographic groups. No more 3-star reviews from white customers and 2.1-star reviews from Black customers. Maria, who had spoken up during the confrontation, asked, "What about reporting problems? What if we see discriminatory behavior?" Anonymous reporting system, Keisha answered, showing a slide with contact information. You can report concerns directly to HR or to me without fear of retaliation. In fact, employees who identify and report discrimination will be rewarded, not punished. But Keisha wasn't finished. She scheduled video calls with all 12 Reynolds locations, addressing the entire company about what had happened and why changes were necessary. What happened at our flagship location doesn't represent who we are as a company, she told her 200-plus employees via video conference. But it happened under our name, in our building, to our customers. That makes it our responsibility to fix. She shared the financial impact data, showing how discrimination hurt business. When we treat customers poorly, we don't just lose one sale. We lose their family's business, their friends' referrals, their community's trust. We lose our reputation. The new policies went beyond training. Customer feedback surveys would now include specific questions about respectful treatment. Sales performance would be measured not just by revenue, but by customer satisfaction scores across all demographics. Management bonuses would be tied to diversity metrics. Within 30 days, Keisha had hired a new sales manager for the flagship location, a woman with extensive experience in inclusive sales practices and community engagement. The Mystery Shopper program launched 6 weeks later, with professional evaluators visiting locations monthly to test customer service standards. But perhaps most importantly, Keisha established an open-door policy for customer concerns, with her personal commitment to respond to discrimination complaints within 24 hours. What would you have done in Keisha's position? Let us know in the comments. 6 months later, Keisha walked through the same showroom where she'd been asked to leave. But everything had changed. The transformation was visible immediately. The sales floor buzzed with diverse energy, customers of all backgrounds browsing vehicles, asking questions, and being treated with equal respect and enthusiasm. The staff looked different too. Where once the team had been predominantly white and male, now it reflected the community it served. The numbers told an even better story. Customer satisfaction scores had increased across all demographics. The flagship location now maintained a 4.2-star average rating from customers of every background. More importantly, the gap between how different groups rated their experience had completely disappeared. Minority customer retention jumped from 38% back up to 68%, nearly matching the company's other locations. Sales to Black and Hispanic customers increased by 45%, not just recovering lost ground, but exceeding previous levels. The location was now one of the top performers in the entire Reynolds chain. But the changes went deeper than sales figures. Keisha had hired Carmen Rodriguez as the new sales manager, a bilingual woman with 15 years of automotive experience and a reputation for building inclusive teams. Under Carmen's leadership, the staff developed genuine expertise in serving diverse customers, learning about different communities' car buying preferences and cultural considerations. The dealership re-established community partnerships that had been lost. The local NAACP chapter resumed recommending Reynolds luxury motors to their members. Hispanic business associations invited Keisha to speak at their events. Black professional organizations returned the company to their preferred vendor lists. Keisha also launched community outreach programs. The dealership began hosting financial literacy workshops, teaching people about car buying, financing options, and negotiation strategies. They partnered with local churches and community centers to provide free car maintenance clinics in underserved neighborhoods. These programs aren't charity, Keisha explained to a business magazine interviewing her about the transformation. They're good business. When people feel respected and supported, they become loyal customers who refer others. But perhaps the most important change was in Keisha's approach to leadership. The Undercover experience taught her that success at the top doesn't guarantee success at every level of the organization. I realized I had become disconnected from my customers' daily experiences, she reflected during a company leadership meeting. I was so focused on financial reports and growth metrics that I missed what was happening on my own sales floor. She now makes unannounced visits to all 12 locations, not as the CEO conducting formal inspections, but as someone who genuinely wants to understand how customers are being treated. She regularly reviews customer feedback, watches security footage, and talks directly with frontline employees about their experiences and observations. The Mystery Shopper program became one of her most valuable tools. Monthly reports showed not just problems, but also highlighted employees who went above and beyond to provide exceptional service to all customers. These employees received recognition and bonuses, creating positive incentives for inclusive behavior. Leadership isn't just about setting policies, Keisha learned. It's about creating a culture where those policies are lived out every day, in every interaction, by every team member. The broader lesson extends far beyond the automotive industry. Unconscious bias doesn't just hurt individuals, it destroys business value. Companies lose customers, damage their reputations, and limit their growth potential when they allow discrimination to flourish. Keisha's experience revealed how bias operates in subtle ways. It wasn't obvious hostility or intentional racism. It was assumptions, different standards, and unconscious judgments about who belongs and who doesn't. These seemingly small actions accumulated into massive business losses and community damage. But the story also demonstrates that change is possible. When leaders take responsibility, implement real consequences, and commit to ongoing accountability, organizations can transform quickly and completely. Every business owner should ask themselves, are we serving our entire community or just the customers who look like us? Keisha now tells other entrepreneurs, are we making assumptions about who can afford our products? Are we treating every person who walks through our door as a valued potential customer? The flagship location's transformation became a model for the entire Reynolds chain. Other automotive companies began studying their diversity initiatives and customer service protocols. Industry publications featured their story as an example of how addressing bias improves both equity and profitability. Most importantly, customers like Marcus Williams, the man whose complaint started Keisha's investigation, began returning to Reynolds dealerships, bringing family members and friends with them. Keisha Reynolds' story is more than just one woman's experience with workplace discrimination. It's a lesson about leadership, accountability, and the courage required to create real change. The key takeaways are clear. First, successful leadership means staying connected to every level of your organization. You can't manage what you don't monitor, and you can't fix problems you don't know exist. Second, unconscious bias isn't just a social issue. It's a business destroyer that costs companies millions in lost revenue and damaged reputations. But most importantly, this story proves that change is possible when leaders take responsibility instead of making excuses. The challenges Keisha faced aren't unique. According to recent studies, minority-owned businesses continue to face significant barriers. Only 18% of all businesses in America are owned by people of color, despite minorities making up nearly 40% of the population. Black women own just 4.2% of all businesses, and they receive less than 1% of venture capital funding. These numbers matter because they represent missed opportunities for individuals, for communities, and for our economy as a whole. When talented people are held back by bias and discrimination, we all lose the innovation, creativity, and economic growth they could contribute. Keisha's experience also highlights how discrimination affects customers, not just employees. When businesses allow bias to influence how they treat potential buyers, they create barriers that hurt entire communities. They send messages about who belongs and who doesn't, who's valued and who's dismissed. But here's what makes this story truly powerful. It shows that one person's decision to investigate, to listen, and to act can transform an entire organization and impact hundreds of lives. Every viewer watching this story has the power to make a difference. Whether you're a business owner, a manager, an employee, or a customer, you can examine your own assumptions and behaviors. You can speak up when you see unfair treatment. You can choose to support businesses that demonstrate real commitment to serving everyone with respect. Ask yourself, have I ever made assumptions about someone based on their appearance? Have I provided different levels of service to different people? Have I remained silent when I witnessed discrimination? Have I supported businesses that don't reflect my values? The automotive industry has made progress since Keisha's experience, but challenges remain. Women still own less than 3% of dealerships. Minority representation in automotive leadership continues to lag behind population demographics. Change happens when enough people decide that equality isn't just morally right. It's good business and essential for strong communities. Keisha Reynolds proved that accountability, combined with decisive action, can transform organizational culture and restore community trust. Her story reminds us that real leadership means creating environments where everyone can succeed. If this story inspired you to be better, like this video, subscribe for more Rise stories, and share this with someone who needs to hear it. Your engagement helps us reach more people with these important messages.